Today on Art Viewing Adventures, I'm joined by Emilie Dashe. She is a San Francisco artist. I know we have Art with Elders coming up after this show. This is sort of the opposite of this. This is art with, someone a little younger, but who's doing really exciting work. And I'm also joined by Verena Lukas, who is a fellow museum guide. So Emilie, Verena, welcome back to Art Viewing Adventures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about Emilie's work and see some examples of her work. But I thought we'd start with a video that it's on YouTube, but we're going to watch. It's a few minutes, and it's Emilie doing a great job of describing her art. So this is a good way for us to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you guys, and then we'll jump in and start talking about her work.
I started this painting with a general vision, allowing the idea to develop in real time. My work explores self-discovery and the impact of societal expectations. I prefer loose drawings and making decisions on canvas. I wanted this painting to have ambiguous body parts and some sort of physical blockage that created an inflated gesture. I wanted to incorporate the imagery of smoking because it's both a performance of wanting to be in control and a provider of relief. It is also in some ways a reaction of ambivalence towards one's own physical health, a manifesto of the human plight. As humans, we project our emotions with destructive power when we try to tame our demons. That's why it's so important to work towards understanding oneself and confronting the parts that one avoids. The paradox of the painting is that my eye is represented, which makes it, in essence, a self-portrait. However, my whole body is absent. The painting encapsulates the feeling of watching over a world that does not want me there as a witness. The great part about abstraction is that I can associate different images together that make me feel a certain way. I can be ambiguous and provoke reactions that prove the strength of these associated images. The audience's intrigue or outrage becomes part of the subject matter. That's the power of my medium. I can build a fantasy of my own that is unavoidably enticing to the eye. The imagery I have here is provocative, with ambiguous body parts being contorted, pierced, or pressed in various ways. But that's the point, Your brain wants to make sense of what it sees right away, so that I can go straight to feeling whatever it needs to feel in the painting. This painting speaks to the desire to belong to a group, wanting to feel accepted, and the fear of rejection, the performance that comes out of that fear of being vulnerable. That's what I'm interested in. I speak loudest through my paintings because that's what allows me to build external faith in myself. Art is my platform for the most private conversations I have with myself. It facilitates accountability for my feelings in a public forum. It gives me options to accept my feelings and express my thoughts. What I love about art is that it directly confronts me to make my own choices. While art doesn't care about how I feel, it does support me in being a witness to my struggles and triumphs. It allows me to trust my own choices and have faith in my curiosity. The mistakes I've made have led me to everything I'm ready to learn from. My endeavor as an artist is to solidify that trust within myself and help others do the same.
So Emilie, I think that's a really well done video. And one of the things I should mention is, your paintings that we're going to look at, they have female body parts. If anybody was concerned about that, you just want to put that up front. I found it. You said the word provocative in that video, but we're going to get into like how people react to these images. I think they're really interesting. But before we get into that, tell us, how did you become an artist? What was your path to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I feel like there's multiple parts to being an artist. There's the love and almost compulsion to create something and to play with the materials itself. And then there's also the sense of agency that you get in putting yourself in your work. And I feel like I've wanted to create things and do things since as long as I can remember being able to pick things up. I took painting lessons as a kid too, just because I loved it so much and I really wanted to get better at it. And I was the type of kid who would really frustrated towards myself all the time because I felt like there was such a disconnect between what I was imagining in my head and what I was capable of doing with my hands. And I think that my mom recognized that, and that's why she put me in painting lessons so that I can hone that craft. But it wasn't until college that I really started thinking about myself and who I am, and putting my thoughts and opinions in my work, because up till then, my desire to make art was kind of skewed by the lens through which I was viewing art, which was a very male dominated lens.
Yeah, and maybe we should just get into that. So can you put up, like, let's put up one of your paintings to give people a sense of what your works look like. And Verena, I know you purchased one of Emilie's works. So I know we'll definitely want to hear, like, okay, so here maybe we should talk about what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
And Verena, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk about, like, your reaction to this image?
Yeah, that was one of the first images I saw because I was in her gallery by accident. And it just really caught me. It is so organic. It is so sensual. It's not really sexual in any way. It's sensual, and the lines are all rounded. It is to me, it's a very, very powerful painting of womanhood.
Mm.
And what you see also sometimes in her sculptures, there is no head. The breasts are on top, so she just leaves out the head. It's just the body of the female, and she's great at it.
Yeah, I have to say, my first reaction when I walked into the gallery, and I went to your gallery, Emilie, because you are right next door to the Schnetzlers,
Yeah.
Greta and Manu Schnetzler, who I really loved their photography for a while, but they were like, you really need to check out Emilie's work. But my first reaction was to be a bit uncomfortable to see these female body parts. And of course, being a straight man, female body is a source of eroticism and pleasure for me. And so my first reaction was to feel uncomfortable. But then my second reaction was to think about, well, why am I uncomfortable about this? I'm attracted to women. Women have played a very important role in my life. So it's kind of made me interrogate that. And my question for you, Emilie, is, have you had viewers that have had similar reactions to what Verena and I are describing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say like the very first person to react like that is myself. And the reason, I mean, obviously I'm not a man, and I don't view nakedness in the same way, but I think that part of the concept of the male gaze is that you perceive yourself not through your own lens, but you perceive yourself through male desire, and how that skews or creates distance between you and yourself and your identity, or how it can create kind of an alternate identity, one that kind of accepts male objectification, because that is the way that we are taught that we have value, that we have worth, is if we are desired by men. And I think my creatures are a way for me to confront that idea that I was valuing myself based off of physical attraction, or lack of physical attraction. And that idea within itself, the fact that I was feeling that way, was really interesting. And I really wanted to confront that because it was also one of my biggest fears. So going back to the painting, I think that they don't have heads to be provocative because it made me uncomfortable first. And that's what I'm kind of searching for in a painting, is to create a tension between what is acceptable, what I feel comfortable with, and what I feel like may not be allowed, or why I feel like it may not be allowed, or why I may feel that it might create reactions, whether they're positive or negative. I think either reaction is very indicative. It's an indication of a simple truth of how we're objectifying the female body, or how we perceive women, and what situation we feel comfortable in objectifying women. And when it's objectified through the lens of a female objectifying herself, all of a sudden those power dynamics shift, and it's not men feeling in control of women. And I think that that is sometimes, at least, part of the reaction, is that they're being confronted to this image of a nude body, but they don't feel like they know how to react to it. And that is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, that was like, I was like, oh, okay, what am I supposed to make of this? Was a reaction. A thought that occurs to me now is, if this was a male artist who had done this, we might feel very differently about it.
Exactly. And that's also part of kind of finding my own style and finding my own practice is what makes my art unique to me, because I think the person expressing themselves is part of the message that they're expressing. I think that you can't just express any message and have it mean the same thing. I think it needs to come from the individual experiencing it for it to feel real and really convey the intricacies of the subject matter.
Yeah, I mean, because our reaction is an important part of the whole artistic process.
Exactly.
Well, I have to say, I love figs, so I kind of love the figs in this. The apples, it makes you think of like the Garden of Eden. And
Yeah.
the popcorn, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to make of the popcorn.
Well, the popcorn is kind of bringing, so there's a lot of elements on this table that kind of bring up these like biblical ideas and are references to kind of the emergence of the female form in art, as that goes back to the creation of organized religion and creating these images and rules that are imposing restrictions on people. Whether it's more women or not is kind of beside the point, I guess. But the popcorn is a way to bring it into a contemporary context. And that's what I really love about the array that's on the table, is that there are some things that make you feel like, oh, this is a really old idea, and others that is like, oh, well, I have popcorn. I have a glass of wine with my friends all the time. And so it kind of merges those two contexts to kind of relate to the idea of how old these narratives are and what they look like in today's world.
That's great, because of course there's no popcorn in the Bible, because corn is a New World thing. Go ahead, Verena.
Another thing that I really find about Emilie, just looking at this, there is the difference between sensuality and sexuality. Mm-hmm. There is no sexuality where you're just saying, this is just not right. The wine bottle is in the correct spot and the crossed feet are in the correct spot. And that prevents it from being a sexual painting. It's so sensual, and that's what Emilie really is.
Now so the sculptures, these are also called Boobelahs, right? these images and the sculptures that you do. How did the Boobelah image come about?
The Boobelah image or the name?
Yeah, like when did you start doing it, and like, tell us about the emergence of this.
Yeah. Well, I actually started doing it. The very first ones that I've done were during my
Getting your
senior.
call.
So let
Is there
me,
anything in the box?
I'll mute that. Somebody needs to be muted. I'll take care of that.
It was during my senior thesis. And
Hello there.
basically that project was my senior thesis was about kind of breaking through the boundaries of figurative representation and kind of finding a way to create agency while also talking about the lack of agency and how to start from a point of feeling, how to empower yourself from a feeling of not feeling empowered. And for me, the way to do that, the way to reach the most amount of people, the way to really not focus on the identity itself was to remove the heads. And by removing the heads of these figures, all of a sudden, I don't know, I can focus on how they were feeling in their body and not exactly who that person was or what their face said about their life. I wanted the way their physicality in the space that I was representing to be the only story that's being told. I wanted to be able to relate to the way that these bodies are interacting and not just who they are, and what that says about them. I wanted to really kind of relate them to the widest amount of people.
Yeah, because there's a universality to them. They're not specific women. They're kind of like every women. Verena, do you have thoughts on that?
No, Emily is just putting it so well into words that I can't be any better than that.
I told Emily, like, I don't think all artists are great about talking about their work, but Emily, you really are. And you've also obviously given us a lot of thought. So let me ask you, let's like kind of move into some other stuff. Who are the artists who have influenced you? And what have been some of your favorite art viewing experiences?
That's a really good question. I'll go back to my earliest influence was probably Louise Bourgeois. And she, among a lot of other art, she's one of artists like Judy Chicago, who's really done so many different types of mediums and who's really doesn't just speak through one medium, has tried everything, and her art practice is very much about her ideas and her experience, and less so about the specific medium that she's telling her story through. But one of the very first art pieces that struck me was her spiders, her giant spider sculptures called Maman. And I just remember thinking that I felt like it was drawing me in a way that I had never felt before, but it wasn't only admiration, it was also kind of fear and disgust. And there were a lot of other emotions trickling into the way that I was experiencing her art. And I remember feeling so liberated by the idea that I was allowed to feel something other than just admiration in art. And that kind of was a pivotal moment for me in discovering art, that it didn't have to be beautiful or aspire to be this passive beauty, that it could also contain undesirable emotions, because our experiences aren't always desirable, but that's still that's very much what makes us human.
Yeah, but I kind of think maybe they are beautiful to her, having heard her talk about them. And there is a beauty. There's
They are
kind of a grotesque beauty to them.
not in a traditional male designated way.
Well, and I think she does, like she calls it maman, and she sees spiders as these maternal figures who really do take care of their young, right?
Yeah, there's also this like this monster like quality to them that gives them power and also instills this idea of fear a little bit. And so I think that they do contain beauty, but the special part of her work and what makes all art special is nuance, is knowing that there can be multiple, even contrasting ideas when you look at one thing, that they don't have to mean one cohesive thing, that it can kind of bring up a variety of emotions.
Yeah, and I just found this headless female body by Louise Bourgeois. I be honest, I didn't know about it before, but I saw that and I thought, what a great connection.
Yeah.
The other artist we were talking about, and it's funny because Verena and I both made this connection independently, was Judy Chicago, and you just brought her up. Do you want to show that Judy Chicago, the image that we were talking about earlier?
The trilogy, Birth Trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, Birth Trinity.
And I saw a real connection because she's really done a lot of very provocative things with female bodies. She's famous for the dinner party, but also let's talk about this. And you just happen to have this already on your desktop, right?
Yeah.
And Verena brought it up. So like, oh yeah, the Birth Trinity. So tell us, like, how does this kind of relate to your work in your mind?
Well, it's, to me, a very feminine sensibility to color, while still kind of using color to create a code of meaning, like creating logical connection through color coding. And I think that she uses color a lot to kind of talk about gender politics, and abstracts the body in order to evoke these ideas. Over here, it's very much about, obviously, birth, but just the way the bodies are relating to each other and contorting and pulling away. It feels a lot more about the sensation and meaning of it, and less about the body's, the aesthetics of the body, or the way that it's represented, or the way that they're positioning. They're very much in action.
So we have, there's a strong sense of connection. There's like a baby coming from its mother, but it's all part of this very important function in the world. It's another, there's another kind of headless body, like what you do.
Yeah.
And then you brought up politics, and I always like that. I always like political art, and one of my reactions to seeing your art was that it is political, that you are trying to kind of give us a view of how women see themselves today. And what are the political objectives you would like to see achieved with your art?
Well, for me, the political objectives are, we were talking about the male gaze earlier, and I think it's important to say that I don't think that the art that is out there is necessarily bad. I think that there's a lot of value in classical art. I do think that it's important to shift the voices that are heard in art and to not have the pool of art that we experience to limit the way that we view ourselves. And I think that that has historically kind of been the problem, is that the world as we know it, in fact, history as we know it, was told and accounted by male historians. The world that we know of was, the things that are important about it were determined by men. And I think that that has shaped a lot of how the world works. And I think my endeavor through my art is to add to that pool, add my experience to the history of art, so that the male perspectives aren't the only ones that were being fed. So yeah, that's my project, or my practice right now, is to kind of understand myself and put myself at the forefront of my work, just because I feel like that is not something that I did in the past. And I think that eventually I want to get to a point where I can tell stories that aren't directly related to my experiences. But I think right now, talking about my experiences is the power in my art. It's both healing for myself and also relatable to other women and even non-women.
Yeah, I think there's a real interesting thing in San Francisco today with the the Mary Cassatt exhibition, and like her. I think people respected her. She was considered one of the impressionists, but they also kind of looked at her works and said, "Oh, well, these are really mostly women and children." And now the show that's on display at the Legion of Honor really gives us another sense of her. First of all, that technically she was an amazing creator, that she was a master of painting in pastel, in printmaking, and that it's another, really helps us understand what it was like for women in the late 19th century, and particularly women who were domestic. So there's like a lot of different nuances to it. And then you talk about the male gaze. She turns out she was good friends with Degas, who was famous for showing all the young dancers and everything. And she even collected his work and then sold some of his paintings to help fund efforts for women's suffrage in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of, you see that whole dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Verena, do you have thoughts on all this?
Well, it's big history, and Emilie is right. Everything was in the hands of men, and they basically ruled the artwork. And slowly, some women started to emerge, and now now we're really having some great modern women artists. An interesting thing about Emilie is too, when I was at her studio, I saw sculptures, and she said she had just basically gotten into sculptures, and that again, it just almost blew me away, because they were also so feminine.
Can we, Emilie, can we see, do you have some good images of some of your sculpture?
Yes, I do. Here, let me get them on my computer.
We'll take a look at that. And yeah, this is all, I think it's interesting. Women were excluded from the art world, or marginalized is really probably a better word, for so long. But now I just want to have us think about, well, now that you do have works like yours, Emilie, in how men are reacting to them, and are there helpful ways like that men can engage with works? And I think about for myself, like seeing the dinner party, the Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party, which is at the Brooklyn Museum, and just really thinking about this way of celebrating women in history, because she's got dinner plates representing many different women in history. So that's kind of why we wanted to do this show, Emilie, is talk about, how your art, how men relate to your art, and how everyone does.
Yeah, I think that, sorry, I was trying to figure out.
There we go. Perfect.
That's the one I have.
That's the one you got it, Verena?
Yeah, she got that to me after I broke the other one. It's beautiful.
In these Boobelahs, to me, I feel like they're very comfortable. They're very at home in their own skin. Is that
Yeah.
How you both see these?
The motive for making them is that I wanted to create these bodies that feel like they take up space in a room, and they're naked, but they're not posing in their nakedness. They're kind of just being and sitting in their nakedness. And that there's something really comforting in seeing that, because as human beings, we tend to kind of replicate what we see. And so creating these characters in sculpture and in my paintings were ways that I could kind of create a reality that I felt comfortable with. And I don't know, just experience a new way of being by creating this like visual thing that I can look to for inspiration.
Yeah, and it's for me, I always tell people what I want most when I have art viewing experiences is I want to see something I never expected to see. I want to be surprised. And I was surprised of all the things I saw at Open Studios. Yours was the thing that really I had the biggest impact on me. I hadn't expected to see something like this. There's your cigarettes. They don't all have cigarettes, but many of them do.
And that's another thing is kind of the idea of smoking is, to me, a very masculine, not necessarily male, but a very masculine act. It's kind of a disregard for your own personal health and kind of wanting to create relief in a world that doesn't give you many moments for relief and to stop and to just kind of breathe. But the power dynamic of holding a cigarette is I don't know, it felt very masculine to me. And when I see women do it, when I think of the women that I know in art in my own family, and also famous women who are painters, they're all like really, really heavy smokers. And when I think about that, I was thinking about whether needing to have a disregard for your own health was a way for women to kind of prove themselves, prove that they don't care, that that obviously they care about their art, but that they don't care about social expectations. They don't care about norms. They don't care about like maintenance to their bodies in the way that women are expected to. So it was kind of like a surprising act of rebellion to be a woman smoker. Obviously now it's not the same, but I feel like it opposes this like classical frail vision of what women are supposed to act like.
Would it be different if she was holding a joint instead of a cigarette?
I mean, that would probably make it an even more contemporary.
It would, especially in San Francisco. So Sherry has a question here, and maybe we can go back to the black sculpture. And I want to ask, she says, I love the twist of the black torso. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I use twisting in my work for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's to kind of create the idea of like pressure, or create the idea of like contorting yourself, or the metaphor that like contorting yourself could mean, which is like moving in order to be comfortable or exist in the space that you're in. Sometimes it's just in a like physical way so that it creates a disruption, and I can kind of think about like how the fat is going to move based on that movement, and how like the musculature or fleshy parts could contort. It's also just like a really fun and free way to experience the body and to kind of discover the medium and how things can be evocative. And in a lot of of my paintings, I mean, in most of my paintings, you see the skin and flesh kind of contorting in different ways. And I think that's mainly, honestly, just because that feels more interesting, and it also feels more feminine, of kind of letting the body sit and contort in the way that it wants, or in an evocative way.
And Sherry asks, and I was going to ask the same thing. What material are these sculptures made from?
They're ceramics. So the black is, they're unglazed ceramics that have been high fired. So they're coil built. They're entirely hollow up until the toes. And this is Black Mountain sculpture clay, and the white one is Sonora white.
Sonora, like it comes from the Sierras?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, it feels very, I think when I'm making these sculptures, it feels very connected to the theme of my work, because I really do feel kind of connected to the earth and connected to like organic forms. And for some reason, that just makes me feel very connected to myself.
Oh, so there's like an earthiness to them, and they literally come from the earth because it's ceramic.
Exactly.
So as a visual artist, this is a question I ask a lot of artists. Like, you put your images out there, but you have no control over how people are going to react to them. And did you worry? Do you worry that people will misunderstand your art? And have you confronted that? Have you had people who've had reactions in your like you really just not getting where I'm coming from?
I have felt that way before. Increasingly less so. Increasingly, I just kind of accept to trust why I make my art, and that I make it for a reason. And that change doesn't just happen overnight, and you're not going to change someone's mind just for that, from them seeing one sculpture or one painting. But sometimes I worry that when people look at my art, they just see boobs and a naked thing, and that they don't connect with it in the way that I make it and I connect with it.
Well, they can be superficial. And then if I had my first reaction to your work and I just walked away,
Yeah.
then that would have been one thing. But
A different experience, the initial contact with the work kind of surfaces your preconceived notions of what a female body is. And then you kind of go back to it, and those preconceptions are kind of put in the background, and you get to kind of experience the work for what it is. So I think experiencing it multiple times is definitely important, if not crucial, to understanding the work itself.
I'm a big believer in like you need to I like the first impression that people have of art, because I always think like that's the purest, but it
Yeah.
isn't always the most profound. And so I think you need to spend more time with it. For me, Amy Sherald was like that. My first reaction wasn't a very good reaction, mainly probably because it was like a week after the election, and I was like completely I was in a bad state of mind. But then to spend more time with it, I really deepened my understanding of it. That's how I feel about looking at your works, that it's really good to return to these things.
Mhm.
Verena, do you have some thoughts on all this?
All I'm really wondering about right now, seeing all this feminist art, what a man right now would think about that, seeing this art for the first time. I mean, you told us about your experience. I mean, there is Paco, and maybe there's somebody else here who's male. I would just wonder, what would a man standing in front of her art think about it?
Well, Paco's made a number of comments in chat that he finds it stunning. I think he's really enjoying these. Paco, you can elaborate on that if you want. Yeah, I mean, different men are going to have different reactions. And then what do we think of men who are going to continue portraying women in art? And are there male artists who do this thoughtfully?
I think that there are men. I mean, I know that there are men who do kind of try to portray the objectification of women, and in a sense, kind of creating images of their experience, and or at least the product of like this digital age, and just seeing images of women in different objectifying ways in such a constant and all-encompassing way, and how that has evolved the way that we carry ourselves and evolved our even activities and norms for like beauty standards and diet culture. But I don't think, again, I think that the person telling the story is part of the art itself. And I think that it kind of comes, it doesn't have the same effect, I think, as when women talk about it, even though it's kind of an interesting topic, and it's surely better than having a complete disregard for women's perspectives and lives and existence. But I think keeping voices like that in the limelight would kind of go against why we make this art in the first place. And it's kind of giving the microphone again to men, and leaving women's opinions directly from the source out of it, which I think can be problematic.
Yep, completely agree. Marcia has her hand raised. Marcia, go ahead and unmute and tell us what your thoughts are.
Well, I wanted to share something a little unusual. I have a son living in San Francisco, and while he is a full-time worker, he is also becoming a writer. And honestly, Emilie, listening to you, I said, oh my gosh, I want my son to hear Emilie speak. And because I think you are talking about your own evolution as an artist, and what you have chosen to, that drives your work. Maybe you didn't choose it, maybe it just drives you.
Yeah.
And I just thought you were, I imagine you were similar in age to my son. He is 26. And so number one, before I ever saw your artwork, I thought, oh my gosh, I want somebody else to hear this artist. And then I thought, wow, he's 26. What will he do and say when he sees the Boobelahs, And it's, sadly, my expectations are not high for that first look, unless I can, get him in a room with Rodney first or something. So, but I will try. It is my intention to share this hour's conversation with him for so many different reasons. So that's all I really wanted to share. So thank you.
I'm glad.
Thanks, Marcia. And we are recording this, and we should be able to share it with him. Emily,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
I mean, that's great. I think that we should be kind of confronting everyone to things that make them maybe uncomfortable, because I think that tension is what changes us as people. And I think inherent to my work is the desire to change how I feel about myself and others, or change with my work. And the only way to do that is to kind of confront the parts of myself that I maybe in the past didn't feel like I was allowed to confront, or like were ideas that weren't socially acceptable. But I think the constant presence of tension in my work is due to the fact that I'm just constantly willing to be vulnerable with myself and vulnerable with my work. And that within itself is an agent of change.
Yeah, and you mentioned discomfort. And one of the things I believe is that you should be willing to be uncomfortable. That sometimes you really need to be uncomfortable to kind of challenge your assumptions.
Exactly.
Right? So, what I'd like the least are things that make me super comfortable, because they're kind of boring, right? What I don't want is I don't want to see the thing that I was expecting to see. If I don't go when I go into the museum, if I don't see something that really goes beyond anything I expected to see, I'm disappointed.
Yeah, because it doesn't necessarily make you think, it just keeps you from thinking. And that is the very distinct difference between the two, is that thinking is what makes us human and what evolves us socially and personally. And without that, it's kind of easy to just coast through what we think is acceptable.
Well, one of the things you see, this is like throughout the whole history of people, is like the younger generation comes along and they always have to challenge the older generation. They always have to, the language is going to be a little different. They're gonna confront, and they're gonna say, we think you guys got whatever it is wrong. And I see that happening today. I see myself being challenged, and I always knew that would happen. I always expected it. And I'm a tour guide for the Haight-Ashbury, and that's the hippies thought they were doing that with their parents' generation, and yet ironically, it's now them, the baby boomers, who are being challenged in this way. So Emily, is it accurate to think of this as a generational way of looking at gender dynamics?
Oh, definitely. I think that change happens in ways that we don't necessarily understand until we compare our present time to a historical time. And I think that is absolutely normal. So I think welcoming discomfort is the antidote to conflict, because disagreeing with someone's reaction, I think, is a waste of time, because someone's reaction isn't necessarily something that they have control over, but the way that we collectively react to ideas that we disagree with says a lot about our future and how we will solve conflict. And I think trying to find understanding in the hardest situations is the only way out and to move forward. So I think that understanding the disconnect between different generations is really important, and having these conversations like we're having right now is vital to our humanity.
Yeah. And we've got male, female differences and then these different generational differences. Verena, since you're of my generation, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, right now, the thoughts I've been having actually since I started seeing Emilie's art, how talking about generational, I wonder how she will evolve. If I see her art now in 2, 3 years, in 10 years, what would I see? And that is now what is really in my head because I love to collect her art. I love to see her art. What is it going to be?
Yeah, no, I have the same thought, Emily. We think you're someone to watch. So, it's Marcia. You have your hand raised again. So, go ahead and unmute and tell us your thought like, this time.
Thank you. I hope I'm not overdoing it on the
No.
mic, but
You're welcome.
I'm struck by the things you say, Emily, which I think are then being said in your art also. And there's a clarity, there's a fierce feminism. And I found myself wondering, did the feminism, did it come from within or did it start from without? By which I mean, did you have feminist models or maybe your mother or, people in your life? Or is it a personal discovery that then informs your art? And
That's a really good question. My mother definitely taught me to be fearless and strong. I think that feminism can take a lot of different shapes. I think the things that have really taught me about feminism in the most long-lasting ways are not necessarily being shown a model of what feminism is, but rather showing me what it's not within myself and me wanting to fight that, if that makes sense. I guess having, I don't know, since as early as I can remember, I feel like I was made to like fight the things that I believed were wrong. And I'm constantly adjusting what that is, what is wrong and right, or if there even is a wrong and right, or the right or wrong way to react to something, or what is most important to cooperation and long-lasting change. But I think the parts of feminism that I feel most connected to are the parts that have changed within myself, the parts of myself that that allowed me to suffer, and wanting to change and understand why I was suffering and accept that I was suffering and try to understand how and why through my art, and in other ways. So I think it comes, to answer your question, from within and from without. I think that I pull lessons of feminism where I can, but nobody is perfect. Even not all feminists or no feminist is feminist 100% of the time. I think it
yeah,
takes a lifelong practice of wanting to learn and love to understand what that is. I think that I pull from people and I also try to fight the injustice that I think that I see in the world and within myself. And the combination of that is what makes my feminist practice what it is today. But I also think that it's constantly evolving and also not necessarily linear. I think it's really easy to slip into kind of misogynist internalized narratives and forget how you want to feel about yourself. So that was a really long answer to your question, but I think it's multifaceted and long story short, both.
I loved it, and your alignment with it, with your alignment with something that is inside is beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and your artwork is good. It's really good conversation starter for all this stuff. Emilie, maybe we can display one more of your images. I'll let you pick it. I wanted to mention one thing. Like, I met Emilie at Open Studios, and you are located. What's the location of your studio? It's south of Market.
Yosemite.
It's on Yosemite Street. In an important thing to know about Emilie, we were talking about your mother, but your parents are both winemakers.
Oh, they are.
Dash cellars. And if you go to Emilie's open studio, I think the next one will be in April. I think they're very likely to be pouring some of their wine at that.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So
They're big supporters of my work. That's something that I'm very, very grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is interesting. I don't remember seeing this. Was this up?
I don't either.
I think that it was, but it was kind of in a corner. And this one, I put it up because it's slightly different. It has human legs. Not that the other ones don't have human legs, but I think, well, this is based off of a photograph. And I really like to work like that, where I base myself off of a photograph so that I can get as deep into detail as I want to, but then kind of riff off of it at some point, because otherwise it just feels, it feels more engaging and interesting when I'm creating something within the painting. And if something new isn't emerging in the painting, then I think it could easily feel very tight and stale. So this is very much about kind of the idea of romance, the part of me that idealizes, romanticizes the idea of romance, and the part of me that fights against it. And I think this was done as a personal project to understand the contrasting parts of myself that are kind of in constant conflict.
Yep, I see the conflict in this, the juxtaposition, I would say, right? Yeah. We had a couple of comments on this from Sherry. She says, I like this one a lot from the perspective of the woman. And we see her in one of her environments.
Yeah. And I also like, I like that I'm in it, that my legs aren't in it, or at least the idea, because when you look at this, the legs are in front, you kind of assume that the person creating the painting is putting themselves in the perspective of the foreground, the legs that you see coming out of the painting. It's almost like if I were to take a selfie. So it really does, whoever's looking at the painting puts themselves directly in the position of the person laying down on the bed, which is inherently the person who painted it, which is myself. But it also has my headless character in it. And so it kind of shows the idea, like how I'm thinking about it, how they function, that they aren't, how these characters portray this like psychological part of myself, and how I interact with it, how it affects me in my daily life. So I think over here, it feels more playful and psychological to have one of my sculptures interact, or one of my creatures interacting with me in the space, because obviously it's a body, but it's not a human body, but I am human and I do have human legs. So it's kind of, it begs the question of like, what is the difference between myself and my creatures, and what am I trying to say through them? What do they mean?
So, Verena, I see you have your hand up, and then we are going to need to wrap up in just a minute. So go ahead, Verena.
I just have a very quick question. The observers, the sculptures on the right-hand side, one of them is handling a fork or a sharp instrument.
A
Now,
pitchfork.
The pitchfork.
a pitchfork. Now, what is that?
Oh, well,
What's the
honestly,
idea?
when I did it, I didn't really, it wasn't that premeditated. I did it in the moment because I was thinking about art history. In that moment, I was thinking of American Gothic and
Yeah.
the idea of
I was thinking about that, yeah.
yeah, like the
Good.
absence of emotion and the kind of being ready to be blunt and threatening.
Good.
Sherry says this also shows others of your skills, including the beautiful folds of the blanket and the geometric shapes of the doors and other things.
Mm.
Also, I have to say I'm intrigued by the painting that's outside the door.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that is also like an art history reference to kind of this classical image of romance and heteronormative heterosexual romance, and the kind of the symbols that are in that. You can't really tell because it's kind of far away, but he's wearing shoes and he's like on this path and she's in the grass barefoot. So it kind of like shows the distinction between the two of agency and how she's othered within the same painting as him, and seen as this kind of like wild creature, and how the creature in the foreground kind of reacts to that through its own creature.
Well, Emilie, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Art Viewing Adventures has been great. Oh, Sherry wants to know, what is this painting named? We didn't really talk about the titles of your paintings.
Is it named? Oh, it's named In My Dreams.
In My Dreams. Well, Emilie, thank you so much. As I said before, I think you're really good at talking about your art, and it's been a real pleasure having you. Verena, I really want to thank you for joining me. It was fun doing this with you.
It's a pleasure doing it with Emilie.
Yeah, thank you so much for Verena for coming on, and Rodney for having me on the show.
Great. Well, we will wrap up Art Viewing Adventures. We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll be talking about an exhibition on view right now at the Berkeley Art Museum. And I'll be joined by Jeanette Pettibone, who is another one of my fellow museum guides. In the meantime, I hope everyone...
happy holidays, Rodney.
Holidays to you, Paco, and to
I'm
the
going
rest
on
of...
vacation from December 15 to January 10.
Well, happy vacation, Paco. Emilie, Verena, I'll be seeing you hopefully sometime in the near future.
Sure.
And thanks everyone else for
Thank
tuning
you.
in.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays, folks. Once
Bye-bye.
more.
Thank you.
Bye, Marcia.